A Living God by Lafcadio Hearn. From immemorial time, the shores of Japan have been swept at irregular intervals of centuries by enormous tidal waves. Tidal waves caused by earthquakes or by submarine volcanic action. These awful sudden risings of the sea are called by the Japanese tsunami. The last one occurred on the evening of June 17, 1896, when a wave nearly 200 miles long struck the northeastern provinces of Miyagi, Iwate, and Aomori, wrecking scores of towns and villages, ruining whole districts, and destroying nearly 30,000 human lives. The story of Hamaguchi Gohei is the story of a like calamity which happened long before the era of Meiji on another part of the Japanese coast. He was an old man at the time of the occurrence that made him famous. He was the most influential resident of the village to which he belonged. He had been for many years its murausa or headman, and he was not less liked than respected. The people usually called him Oji-san, which means grandfather, but being the richest member of the community, he was sometimes officially referred to as the Choja. He used to advise the smaller farmers about their interests, to arbitrate their disputes, to advance them money at need, and to dispose of their rice for them on the best terms possible. Hamaguchi's big thatched farmhouse stood at the verge of a small plateau overlooking a bay. The plateau, mostly devoted to rice culture, was hemmed in on three sides by thickly wooded summits. From its outer verge the land sloped down in a huge green concavity as if scooped out to the edge of the water, and the whole of this slope, some 3/4 of a mile long, was so terraced as to look when viewed from the open sea like an enormous flight of green steps divided in the center by a narrow wide zigzag, a streak of mountain road. 90 thatched dwellings and a Shinto temple composing the village proper stood along the curve of the bay, and other houses climbed straggling up the slope for some distance on either side of the narrow road leading to the Choja's home. One autumn evening, Hamaguchi Gohei was looking down from the balcony of his house at some preparations for a merrymaking in the village below. There had been a very fine rice crop, and the peasants were going to celebrate their harvest by a dance in the court of the Ujigami. The old man could see the festival banners, nobori, fluttering above the roofs of the solitary street. The strings of paper lanterns festooned between bamboo poles, the decorations of the shrine, and the brightly colored gathering of the young people. He had nobody with him that evening but his little grandson, a lad of 10. The rest of the household having gone early to the village. He would have accompanied them had he not been feeling less strong than usual. The day had been oppressive, and in spite of a rising breeze, there was still in the air that sort of heavy heat which, according to the experience of the Japanese peasant, at certain seasons precedes an earthquake. And presently an earthquake came. It was not strong enough to frighten anybody, but Hamaguchi, who had felt hundreds of shocks in his time, thought it was queer. A long, slow, spongy motion. Probably it was but the after-tremor of some immense seismic action very far away. The house crackled and rocked gently several times. Then all became still again. As the quaking ceased, Hamaguchi's keen old eyes were anxiously turned toward the village. It often happens that the attention of a person gazing fixedly at a particular spot or object is suddenly diverted by the sense of something not knowingly seen at all, by a mere vague feeling of the unfamiliar in that dim outer circle of unconscious perception which lies beyond the field of clear vision. Thus it chanced that Hamaguchi became aware of something unusual in the offing. He rose to his feet and looked at the sea. It had darkened quite suddenly, and it was acting strangely. It seemed to be moving against the wind. It was running away from the land. Within a very little time, the whole village had noticed the phenomena. Apparently no one had felt the previous motion of the ground, but all were evidently astounded by the movement of the water. They were running to the beach and even beyond the beach to watch it. No such ebb had been witnessed on that coast within the memory of living man. Things never seen before were making apparition. Unfamiliar spaces of ribbed sand and reaches of weed-hung rock were left bare even as Hamaguchi gazed. And none of the people below appeared to guess what that monstrous ebb signified. Hamaguchi Gohei himself had never seen such a thing before, but he remembered things told to him in his childhood by his father's father, and he knew all the traditions of the coast. He understood what the sea was going to do. Perhaps he thought of the time needed to send a message to the village or to get the priests of the Buddhist temple on the hill to sound their big bell. But it would take very much longer to tell what he might have thought than it took him to think. He simply called to his grandson, "Tada, quick, very quick, light me a torch." Taimatsu or pine torches are kept in many coast dwellings for use on stormy nights, and also for use at certain Shinto festivals. The child kindled a torch at once, and the old man hurried with it to the fields, where hundreds of rice stacks representing most of his invested capital stood awaiting transportation. Approaching those nearest the verge of the slope, he began to apply the torch to them, hurrying from one to another as quickly as his aged limbs could carry him. The sun-dried stalks caught like tinder, the strengthening sea breeze blew the blaze landward, and presently, rank behind rank, the stacks burst into flame, sending skyward columns of smoke that met and mingled into one enormous cloudy whirl. Tada, astonished and terrified, ran after his grandfather, crying, "Oji-san, why? Oji-san, why?" But Hamaguchi did not answer. He had no time to explain. He was thinking only of the 400 lives in peril. For a while the child stared wildly at the blazing rice, then burst into tears and ran back to the house, feeling sure that his grandfather had gone mad. Hamaguchi went on firing stack after stack till he had reached the limit of his field. Then he threw down his torch and waited. The acolyte of the hill temple, observing the blaze, set the big bell booming, and the people responded to the double appeal. Hamaguchi watched them hurrying in from the sands and over the beach and up from the village like a swarming of ants, and to his anxious eyes scarcely faster, for the moment seemed terribly long to him. The sun was going down. The wrinkled bed of the bay and a vast sallow speckled expanse beyond it lay naked to the last orange glow, and still the sea was fleeing toward the horizon.